Well, hello, and welcome to the Focused on Infinity Hour, more or less. That was the amazing Jackie Venson, and I am so glad to get to share her work with you. If you were not already a fan, I know you are now. Um, Breaking into, the Star Spangled Banner in like that sort of Jimi Hendrix style, but like in her own way, and the way that she is just so connected to the guitar. It's like, so I saw someone say, that it's like an extension of her, and it's so clear. It's like, every single note was pinpoint and just amazing. She is an amazing artist, and listen, got to support real people, real artists. For everything I know, we've been mutuals for a while, and she just started putting her music out and getting right to the people. And that is what's supposed to happen. We have the tools now to bring our work and our words directly to folks, like we're doing here on this show. Happy MLK Day. Even though I think they're going to try and roll it back under this current administration, but we never gave a fuck about that, did we? And we're going to talk a little bit later about how it all came to be. But what I wanted to start with was a couple things about MLK and a couple of little tidbits, things that I've uncovered, things that I've discovered that you may not have known. Martin Luther King Jr. was a tremendously important historical figure, and I think that, now it's easy enough to look back at him and his life, with like the lens of history. But at the time, a lot of people, even people who are right in this room, might have been like, I don't know if I agree. Or I used to agree with him when he was just doing the peaceful sit-ins, but now that he's talking about the economics, I don't know, because that's what happened. Towards the end of his life, he had a pretty low popularity rate. Because as he became more air quotes radical, right? My belief is that early on, when he was just talking about, Black rights and in a way that seemed separate from the rights of everyone else, it was easy for them. I mean, they hated that too. Don't get me wrong. The powers that be hated that. But when it's posited that like Black rights and the rights of marginalized people are a separate issue, and it's like an our problem rather than a white people problem, then it's more acceptable, right? But as he grew to learn more and see more and watch just what the state was willing to do to people that were non-violently resisting, he became more radical, right? I've got a few of his quotes that you may not have heard from this book. It is the Playboy Interviews of Alex Haley. It's a rare book that I found. And also, I'm going to say this right now, and I will say it again. Alex Haley is responsible for everyone thinking that Martin Luther King and Malcolm X had some fucking big rivalry. It's not true. It's not true. Alex Haley basically made it up just about out of whole cloth. I have an article here. I'm going to read you just a little piece from. I'm going to read you a couple of things tonight. Jonathan Eig was deep in the Duke University archives researching his new biography of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. when he made an alarming discovery. King's harshest and most famous criticism of Malcolm X, in which he accused his fellow civil rights leader of fiery demagogic oratory, appears to have been fabricated. I think its historic reverberations are huge, Eig told the Washington Post. We've been teaching people for decades, for generations, that King had this harsh criticism of Malcolm X, and it's just not true. So, be careful. Be very careful, even with the history that you think you know. These two people were not at odds. In fact, they were coming from two sides of the same coin. And as their lives came to a close, they came closer and closer together, right? Because Malcolm X was becoming more, air quotes, radical. I mean, Martin Luther King was becoming more, air quotes, radical. And Malcolm X, who we should refer to as Malik Shabazz, because that was the name that he changed his name to after he went to Mecca. Malik Shabazz, after returning from Mecca, was like, actually, I don't hate all white people. Began to see the difference between white individuals and the white power structure. And that made them, they both became more dangerous when they realized that both things are true, right? You need the peaceful sit-in and refusing to move. You need the boycott. You need the passive ways of resisting. And you also need to be standing by the window with a shotgun and saying by any means necessary, because it is not either or. It is always both. But back to a couple of quotes by Martin Luther King that you may have not heard. One of them is, this one is just him talking about the falseness of white supremacy. You may remember that during the rise of Nazi Germany, a rash of books by respected German scientists appeared supporting the master race theory. This utterly ignorant fallacy has been so thoroughly refuted by the social scientists as well as by medical science that any individual who goes on believing it is standing in absolutely misguided and diminishing circle. The American Anthropological Association has unanimously adopted a resolution repudiating statements that Negroes are biologically, in innate mental ability, or in any other way inferior to whites. As far as Negro blood is concerned, medical science finds the same 4 blood types in all race groups. Again, this was a man who knew it wasn't just, preacher rhetoric, but also he knew his science. He knew what was up. He knew how to talk to people on multiple levels. Another great quote. It is true that some Negroes subscribe to a deep feeling that the tactic of nonviolence is not producing enough concrete victories. We have seen, in our experience, that nonviolence thrives best in a climate of justice. Violence grows to the degree that injustice prevails. The more injustice in a given community, the more violence, or potential violence, smolders in that community. This is, again, towards the end, getting later in his life, as he was beginning to acknowledge that violence was the inevitable end of living under these systems. Now, this is him talking about the practical economic strategies to give money to Black folks. The one that, like he was talking about in that first clip that we opened the show with. About $50 billion, actually, which is less than 1 year of our present defense spending. This is me talking now. Can you imagine the $1 trillion that we're spending now on our military, right? The fact that it's ballooned that much in 50 years, absolutely ridiculous. Back to the quote. It is my belief that with the expenditure of this amount over a 10-year period, a genuine and dramatic transformation could be achieved in the conditions of Negro life in America. I am positive, moreover, that the money spent would more than amply be justified by the benefits that would accrue to the nation through a spectacular decline in school dropouts, family breakups, crime rates, illegitimacy, rioting, and other social evils. Haley says, do you think it's realistic to hope that the government would consider an appropriation of such magnitude other than for national defense? And King says, I certainly do. This country has the resources to solve any problem once that problem is accepted as national policy. It was not just the hand-holding, even though that was important. And that's something that we need to remember, right? A lot of this, since Martin Luther King has been so thoroughly misappropriated by liberals and even sometimes by conservatives, right? Trying to just talk about the kumbaya elements of it. It's easy for us to forget that these supposed kumbaya elements are actually the heart of it, because the love is the center of it, right? Because there is no difference between races. It's bullshit. It's a lie, right? And even though we have to do some gatekeeping as BIPOC because of the way the world treats us, it doesn't make it actually real, right? Something can be fake and also very real at the same time. But race isn't real. We know that. We know that deep down. And that is important to remember. That message of equality between people, of us all actually being the same, we are all equally great and all equally terrible, no matter what ethnicity we come from, right? You can find, and one of the things about my own upbringing that I so appreciate, growing up in New York, living on what I call the borderland. I don't know if you know this about New York City, but on the east side, at least, 96th Street is basically the official divide between Yorkville to the south, where some of the wealthiest people literally on the planet live, and East Harlem, directly to the north. And there's no wall. There's nothing holding that border. It's not even like an Alameda Boulevard situation like in LA. It's just one that is enforced essentially by people just thinking that they belong in one place or the other, right? White people thinking it's too dangerous in one place, and conversely, black people in some place, for some reasons, thinking it's too dangerous to go south, or it's just not for us. But I went to school south of 96th Street, and I went to church as a child north. And in the same day, I would be amongst, the wealthiest, kids who were coming to school in limousines, people who had never taken the subway in their lives, who grew up and lived in New York City their entire lives and had never been on a piece of public transportation because they just took a cab or they had a driver to get them everywhere, right? And on the other hand, people who lived in roach-infested, where there was urine all over everything in the entire building projects. And you get to see that the conditions are caused externally to us all. No one should be blamed for the conditions of their birth. And we have to learn how to work together, despite the baggage, despite the quite reasonable pain we have with dealing with certain kinds of people. Sometimes it is difficult. I understand. I always say I understand when black folks want nothing to do with white folks. I get it. It is not a choice that I would ever make, partially because I believe strongly in what both MLK and Malik Shabazz believed at the end of their lives, which is that there's no hope without us all. Without unity of the people against the oppressor, right? Like Fred Hampton said, you are not the pig, you are the people. And the pig is not just the cops, but everybody above the cops, to me. So if we don't stand together, we're done for. That is a great message to take from all of his work and his words on this day. And there's another thing. I talk about sex positivity a lot. And a lot of people have a hard time with that one as one of the 12 values because there is so much trauma around sex and sexuality and around, frankly, men, especially cis men, being absolute dog shit, right? But sex negativity is a way that the overculture gets into you, in a way that it wins. Okay. Martin Luther King, obviously like any human, not a perfect person. Was he fucking? Probably. He was probably fucking. MLK was probably fucking. And you know what? I do not care. It is not my business. You and I don't know what he and Coretta talked about. We don't know. And also, why does that have anything to do with what we think about how he was as a leader, the things he said, the way that he was able to organize? What has that got to do with it, right? Even people who have great politics, who appreciate all these things, will sometimes feel the need to put in like, oh, but he was a cheater, or oh, he was XYZ. And first of all, your ass don't know that. Second of all, how is that your business? Dead ass. Be honest, right? Don't let sexuality is a really fraught thing in the overculture because it's so important to us all. It's a need, not a want, right? For humans. I mean, for all mammalian organisms, at least, all organisms, probably. But don't get yourself got being in other people's bedrooms. Now, if somebody is a liar or an abuser, that's a different story, right? Big difference between being an abuser and somebody who fucks. Straight up. So without further ado, we're going to get into the rest of our show. I want y'all to remember all of the things that you've heard and seen so far. And I want you to remember that this is a really, really important time in history. And you're part of it. And I'm part of it. And every day that goes on, it's going to unfold more and more, right? The next year, whether we're looking at it just, purely by the law of one thing leads to another, or astrologically, or whatever way we're looking at it, you and I can both feel what's coming. And it's a lot. And we need to be ready, right? And we fortify ourselves with what? With preparation and also with connection. Because the revolution is what? The revolution is just relationships. That's what it really is. Your relationship to each other, your relationship to the government, your relationship to money, your relationship to your own ideas and conception of self and what that self is and can be, right? What you were yesterday is not what you have to be tomorrow. And that should change based on the conditions that you see in front of you. But speaking of the astrology that's coming up, we're going to go right to our very own Alice Pope with the Astrological Weather Report. Mistrix, take us there.